In this podcast episode, Andrew Huberman hosts Dr. Ralph Adolphs, a renowned professor of psychology, neuroscience, and biology at Caltech, to delve deeply into the neuroscience and psychology of emotions. They explore what emotions are from a functional and biological perspective, how emotions relate to brain circuits and bodily states, why some emotions dominate behavior while others don't, and the interplay between conscious experience and automatic emotional responses. The conversation also touches on tools for improving emotion regulation, the role of the body and brain in emotional experience, contemporary research on facial emotion perception, insights into social and emotional intelligence, including autism, and practical methods such as ice baths and meditation for emotional resilience. Dr. Adolphs addresses the enduring question of what emotions really are, challenging the skepticism surrounding the concept. He positions emotions as functional states characterized by their purpose, controlling behavior in response to environmental challenges that require flexible and scalable responses, positioned between rigid reflexes and highly flexible goal-directed planning. Emotions prioritize behavior, interrupt ongoing actions, and carry motivational significance over time. They are distinguished by features such as priority, valence, approach versus avoidance, scalability, and temporal persistence, allowing organisms to respond adaptively to things like predators or other threats in a manner far more sophisticated than simple reflexes. The discussion highlights that while consciousness and the feeling aspect of emotions are commonly conflated, Dr. Adolphs argues for separating the scientific study of emotion from conscious experience. Although conscious experience is often seen as the ground truth for recognizing emotions, equating emotions solely with feeling in the moment limits scientific progress, especially across species where consciousness is hard to measure. This distinction allows studying emotion as a process and a set of brain and bodily states without needing to tackle the difficult problem of consciousness directly. The conversation underscores the uniquely human capacity to consciously observe and regulate emotions. Emotional granularity, the ability to differentiate and label nuanced emotional states, plays a key role in regulating emotional responses effectively. Dr. Adolphs emphasizes that emotional regulation is trainable and can become automatic and effortless with practice, making emotional responses smoother and more adaptive. The role of language in emotional granularity is discussed, but with recognition that concepts can exist outside of verbal labeling. The challenge lies in managing complex, mixed emotions and preventing maladaptive rumination, or rabbit holes, which reflect brain states that can amplify negative feelings if not regulated. Dr. Adolphs shares his personal experiment with cold exposure via ice baths, describing how it has led to a direct downregulation of autonomic emotional responses to stressors in daily life, such as anger induced by someone honking while he tries to park. He explains that cold exposure reliably activates noradrenaline and adrenaline systems while sometimes reducing cortisol, training the autonomic nervous system to regulate emotional responses more efficiently. This physiological training complements cognitive methods and builds resilience by strengthening automatic emotion regulation circuitry. Conversations about temporal persistence focus on research showing that emotions last beyond immediate stimuli and are maintained by complex neurobiological mechanisms, including slower neurotransmitters like neuropeptides. A key study discussed involved patients with severe medial temporal lobe amnesia who continued to feel sadness moments after viewing sad stimuli, despite having no declarative memory of it, demonstrating that emotional persistence can be independent of memory. This persistence is fundamental to the function of emotions and differentiates them from reflexes, enabling sustained behavioral motivation in fluctuating environments. Dr. Adolphs affirms that many animals possess emotions with functional criteria such as priority and scalability, evidenced by behavioral studies and observable responses in pets and wild animals. The question of whether AI systems can have functional emotions is broached with caution but open-mindedness toward the notion that functionally defined emotions might apply to AI in the future. However, conscious emotional experiences appear to be uniquely human and animal phenomena, not currently evidenced in AI. The podcast critically examines the widely accepted idea, popularized by Paul Ekman, that universal facial expressions perfectly reveal basic emotions. Dr. Adolphs notes that Ekman's original studies involved posed, exaggerated facial expressions and multiple-choice tasks that do not reflect real-world complexity. Natural emotional expressions are dynamic, subtle, and context-dependent, making perfect recognition difficult. Empirical evidence demonstrates that humans tend to overestimate their ability to read emotions from faces, and that context, including speech, environmental cues, and behavioral patterns, is critical to accurate emotion perception. Emotional intelligence is characterized as the flexible ability to recognize and regulate one's own emotions, as well as perceive and influence others' emotions in contextually appropriate ways. Dr. Adolphs stresses that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. A wide repertoire of regulation strategies and social behaviors, combined with the ability to switch flexibly depending on context, is key. Emotional granularity and metacognition enable this flexibility. The balance between emotional attunement and self-focused agency is critical, illustrated by examples of physicians and high-stakes operators who skillfully toggle between empathy and task-focused detachment. Dr. Adolphs discusses research on visual attention to faces and social stimuli, particularly in autism spectrum disorder, ASD, populations. Using webcam and eye tracking studies, his lab observes that individuals with higher autistic traits, including those without formal diagnoses, tend to make less eye contact and are more distracted by non-social stimuli compared to neurotypical controls. The degree of social attention is a stable personality-like trait correlated with ASD symptom severity, but also varies widely in the general population. The implications of this variation for social success and emotional well-being remain areas of ongoing research. Autism exemplifies the complexity of social cognition variability, and efforts to train social skills emphasize developing a flexible, adaptive social repertoire rather than rigid behavior. The integration of brain circuits in bodily states is fundamental to emotional experience. Dr. Adolphs highlights research on the insula cortex, a key brain region receiving interoceptive input from the entire body and serving as a substrate for conscious feeling states, including emotions and pain. The famous bodily maps of emotion studies capture how people conceptualize emotions as localized bodily sensations, although these reports represent subjective beliefs rather than direct physiological measures. The close communication between brain and body implicates cascades of organ-level changes in different emotion states, suggesting that high-dimensional physiological signatures associated with emotions remain to be fully elucidated. The conversation explores awe as a uniquely human emotion that derives from the ability to adopt broad metacognitive perspectives beyond immediate sensory input. Awe arises from shifts in spatial and temporal attention, such as contemplating vast scales or long-time horizons, and it supports a sense of gratitude and connection to life. This contrasts with emotions triggered by immediate threats or rewards, emphasizing how human emotional life encompasses sophisticated internal states enabled by mental time travel, theory of mind, and self-reflection. Dr. Adolphs addresses how abstract art and music can evoke shared emotional states across individuals despite lacking figurative content. These stimuli activate core emotional brain structures like the insula and amygdala and elicit physiological responses such as chills. Computational analysis of visual features predicts subjective preferences for abstract art, while emotions likely evolved for adaptive responses to tangible environmental stimuli. Patterns in sound or visual composition can tap into these circuits, supporting shared emotional experiences through culturally and individually meaningful modalities like music and art. Regarding the neural basis for recognizing faces and emotional expressions, the discussion notes that certain brain regions are predisposed to processing faces from birth in a refined manner that matures with experience. Single neurons rarely encode complex stimuli like smiling versus frowning faces exclusively. Rather, populations of neurons collectively represent these distinctions. This coding occurs across hierarchical stages from basic visual features, edges, contours, to more abstract, invariant representations, allowing recognition of faces and emotional cues regardless of orientation, lighting, or context. Emotions similarly arise from abstract neural states integrating multisensory inputs to generate flexible, scalable responses. The importance of training the brain's ability to switch between mental states and tasks is emphasized, with meditation and brief moments of silence serving as effective brain resets. The cost of switching, the cognitive inertia, and the lag in fully engaging new mental processes is a focus of current neuroscience. Introducing mindfulness or meditative pauses before focused activities enhances attention and reduces residual interference from previous tasks, improving cognitive and emotional regulation. Dr. Adolphs' lab employs brief meditative silences in lab meetings to foster focused, calm engagement with scientific discourse, a practice gaining traction for its mental health and performance benefits. Insights from special operations personnel and other high-stakes professionals converge on the idea that emotions can cloud judgment in critical moments and therefore need to be regulated or suppressed during peak performance. However, allowing emotion to take precedence in appropriate contexts, e.g., family life, is essential for authentic human connection and well-being. Training mechanisms for rapidly shifting emotional priorities and controlling impulsive responses are vital, and practices such as cold exposure and ultra-endurance races may contribute to building resilience and emotional mastery. Dr. Adolphs reflects on his personal experience with illness, noting how confronting mortality engages a spectrum of emotions, from fear and sadness to acceptance, awe, and gratitude. The process of emotional regulation, intrapersonal and interpersonal, is central to coping and ultimately appreciating life's fragility and richness. The neuroscientific view reframes death as a gradual loss of the brain's construction of reality, underscoring the imperative to maximize meaningful experiences and emotional fulfillment while alive. The interview touches on the impact of constant social media engagement and digital distractions on emotional control and mental clarity. Stepping away from these inputs and practicing focused solitude, whether through running, meditation, or other quiet activities, allows for metacognitive training and emotional recalibration. Reducing digital noise fosters better executive control and resilience to emotional perturbations in everyday life. Throughout the episode, several sponsors provide tools aligned with health, sleep, hydration, and laboratory diagnostics, which relate indirectly to maintaining the bodily and brain health underpinning emotional regulation. The integration of cutting-edge science with practical lifestyle interventions exemplifies the applied nature of contemporary neuroscience communication.